Someone was supposed to have left. That is how these things are witnessed, not through intention, not through the deliberate positioning of someone who wanted to see what they saw, but through the specific accident of being present when presence was not expected. A schedule that changed, a door that was not fully closed, a moment that belonged entirely to one person and was witnessed by another simply because the circumstances that were supposed to prevent the witnessing failed to do so. Someone was supposed to have left the floor. They had not left. What they witnessed in the minutes that followed is something they have carried for a long time without sharing it. Not because it was shameful. It was not shameful. It was the opposite of shameful. It was one of the most human things one person has ever accidentally seen another person be. But because some things, when witnessed without permission, belong to the person they happen to, rather than to the person who saw them. Because witnessing something private does not give you ownership of it. It gives you a responsibility. This person carried the responsibility for a long time. They are sharing it now. Not completely. There are parts of what they saw that they would not give to anyone. That will stay with them, because giving them away would cross a line that they have been very clear about from the beginning of this telling. But the shape of it, the outline, enough that what happened that night can be understood by people who are not there and who desire to understand it, because what it reveals about him is something that the version of him that exists publicly has never contained. Let me tell you what was known before that night. He does not cry. This is not a rumor or an assumption or the kind of thing people say about powerful men, because powerful men are expected to not cry, and so the expectation becomes the reputation. It is something that the people who know him have observed across years of knowing him. He has been in situations, the kind that would produce tears in most people, the kind where the emotion is large enough and the circumstances private enough that the absence of visible response would be unusual for almost anyone else. And he has been still, present, feeling clearly whatever he was feeling, but not crying. The stillness is genuine. This matters because the alternative interpretation that he suppresses, that the absence of visible emotion is a performance of control, rather than an accurate representation of how he actually processes things, would change what that night means. If he suppresses, then the crying is a breakdown of suppression. If the stillness is genuine, then the crying is something else entirely. The stillness is genuine, which means that night was something else entirely. The person who witnessed it was at the end of the corridor when they heard the sound. Not loud. This is the first thing they say when they describe it, the first detail they reach for, because it is the one that surprised them most. They had expected in the half second before understanding arrived that what they were hearing was something ordinary. Something that had a simple explanation that would resolve itself without requiring them to make any decision about what to do. It was not loud enough to be ordinary. It was the specific sound of something being felt in a way that had no other available exit. The sound of an emotion that had been contained for longer than containment was possible and had finally found the only form available to it. Small, private. The kind of sound that is not meant for any room beyond the one it is made in. The person stopped. They did not move forward. They did not retreat. They stood where the corridor placed them, and they understood, in the way that understanding arrives before you have processed enough information to justify it, what they were hearing. He was alone. The room he was in, the specific room, which this person will not identify beyond saying it was not a room he used for anything official. Not a room with a function that belonged to the public version of his life. A room that was simply his in the private way that certain spaces become yours, not through designation but through use, was dark. They could see this from where they were standing. The light that came from under the door was not the light of a room that was occupied in any normal sense. Dark room, that sound. The person stood in the corridor for what they described as a long time, but which was probably, they acknowledge, much shorter than it felt. Time moves differently when you are receiving information that requires you to rearrange your understanding of something you thought you knew. They thought they knew him. They knew a version of him. The version that occupies rooms with the full weight of who he is, that carries the responsibilities of his position without appearing to carry them, that moves through the world with a quality of presence that people describe consistently as settled, grounded, the specific quality of someone who knows where he stands. That version was not in the dark room. What was in the dark room was the version underneath. The one that exists in every person beneath the version they show, Not a false version, not a hidden version in the sense of something concealed out of shame, but the private version. The one that does not have to perform subtleness because it is not being observed. The one that is allowed to feel the full weight of whatever it is carrying because the carrying does not need to be invisible to anyone. He was carrying something heavy that night. The person in the corridor does not know precisely what. They have their understanding, assembled from what they knew of the period, the specific things that had been happening in the weeks before, the particular quality of certain conversations they had been present for, where something had been present underneath the surface of what was being said. They have a sense of the shape of what he was feeling. They will not name it. What they will say is this: it was not a small thing. Whatever he was carrying into that dark room on that night was not the ordinary weight of an ordinary difficult day. It was something he had been carrying for longer than that night. Something that had been building across time in the specific way that certain things build when they are not given any release. Quietly, internally, adding to themselves with each day that passes without the release arriving. That night the release arrived, not because he chose it, because it chose him. Arrived in the dark room in the form of a sound that was too small to be heard from anywhere except the corridor, in a moment that he had believed was completely private, witnessed by one person who was not supposed to still be on that floor. The person in the corridor made a decision. They turned around, walked back the way they had come, did not announce their presence, did not knock on the door or speak or give any indication that what was happening in the dark room had been heard by anyone. They removed themselves from the corridor, and they took with them the knowledge of what they had heard, and they made, in the walking away, a decision about what that knowledge was and what it entitled them to. It entitled them to nothing. They have held this since that night. What it changed in them, in how they understood him, in what they believed was underneath the version they had known, is not something they can fully articulate. They try. They say it made him more, not more than he was. He had always been complete, fully himself, never a diminished version of what he actually was, more in the sense of more present to them, more real. The specific reality that arrives when you understand that someone you respect is not exempt from the things that make the rest of us human. He was not exempt. He had never been exempt. He had simply been better than most at keeping the not exemption private. That night it was not private. That night it was a sound in a dark room, heard by one person in a corridor who was not supposed to still be there, and who turned around and walked away and said nothing and has said nothing until now. He does not know he was heard. He still believes that night belonged entirely to him. In every way that matters, in every way that the person who heard it has any control over, it does. What they are sharing now is not the night. It is what the night means. It means he feels it, all of it. Everything that the settled, grounded, fully present version of him moves through without appearing to be moved by. He feels it. In dark rooms, alone, in moments that were supposed to be witnessed by no one. He feels it. That is what nobody was supposed to know. That is what one person in a corridor knows. That is what changes everything about every room he has ever entered and appeared unchanged by. He carries it, all of it, every night,